My name's Emma McCone. I am with CGC, Community Garden Connections. Some of you may be site representatives from sites that we work with, and we're so glad to have you. And some of you may be new to CGC, and it's also really great to have you all here with us as well. I am also the farm steward for the Westmoreland Garden Project. So if you ever have heard of that or are interested, I'm more than happy to share a bit more. You can see here is the agenda for today. We'll go through some intros, intro of myself, and then I'll give anybody who would like to share an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. I have a sheet here that we can start to set goals for our gardens, giving you some tools to set those goals that might be new to you or might be something that you are continuing to develop on in your abilities as a gardener, the planning process, and then some special topics related to insects, beneficial insects, insects that are a little bit, a little bit worse for our garden. We'll be talking about soil health and seed starting, and then we'll close up for the day. So I'm really glad to be here with you and so grateful for the library for opening up this space for us, which is a little bit of a new format for CGC. So I'm glad to be here to help do that. Just talking about the library a little bit, they do have some really amazing gardening resources that it's so cool that we're partnering with them on. So there's the tool lending library, which is in the makerspace. And the makerspace, you head out this door straight and you keep going up those stairs, and the makerspace is on your right and will be open after the workshop if you want to see the tools that they have available for gardening. They have some forks and some other resources that you can use in your garden by renting them out from the library. They also have a seed library where you can get up to 5 packets of seeds for different vegetables and flowers that you would like to grow in your garden, herbs. So those are also available through the program that they have here. Something else that's pretty cool here at the library is that they're collaborating this year with the Community Kitchen on a Grow a Row program where you can grow a row of vegetables for the Community Kitchen that you can donate to them, which is a really cool program that I think starts to connect those pieces of food access and security in our community that we can all be involved in, which is the goal of Community Garden Connections, is to make food accessible and empower people to know more about where their food comes from and able to grow their food. So those are some programs through the library. These are just the handouts that I brought, but there's more at the seed seed area over in the atrium that's also always open and available. So whenever you come into the library, you can see that. And those will be right here for information. So now I will open it up to you all to introduce yourselves. There will be some people who will introduce themselves from Zoom and some people in person, but I would love to know your name, what you are here to learn, if you are coming from a garden site associated with CGC, or you are a home gardener. It would be lovely to know about that. So could I ask somebody here in person to start? Hi. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Carol Jones.
Okay.
And I've been a gardener for years, but I'm soil that's not great. So I'd like to learn more about the soil. And I'm not a great garden planner.
Yeah.
I just sort of put it in.
Okay.
And so I'd like to learn more about that.
Okay, wonderful. Hopefully we'll be able to do that through this planning process.
Yes.
Yes. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Libby, and I work with CGC over in Antioch.
Hi, I'm Deb. Bill and I will live at the park under the community garden, and it's a really small spot, but the soil is so bad. We have not gotten any weeds out of it, and we're doing vegetables.
When we had a house, we had several big gardens.
We're not having one, so it's not bad.
Well, we will be talking about some soil health attributes, some things that we can add to the soil during one of our small groups. So hopefully we'll be able to learn a lot from each other and from some of the resources that we have about that. So hopefully we can do that
Is this
together.
gonna be an ongoing thing, or is this a one-time thing, or?
This is a one-time thing for right now, but we will have a feedback form at the end of the session, and we'd love any feedback on what other types of sessions and workshops that you would like to see, because this is something that we would love to grow.
I'm Teresa Noel. Yes, and we might be doing some gardening in like buckets maybe, but I'm also, I don't know if MFS is still affiliated with Community Connections, but I will be doing some gardening behind the Y. So I'm just wondering if you have a refresher, with, refreshing information.
Yeah, great, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin, beginner gardener, vegetables and flowers, and I just had my son-in-law, a surprise to me, go to till a huge spot in my yard, so I'm very excited, but I have to figure out what to do with it.
Yes. Well, that's so great. We were hoping that this would be a place for hope, where we can put hope into action so that we can actually plan for those beautiful things that we imagine being in those spaces. So I hope we can all do that. Okay, so now we have our Zoom folks. Jay, will they be able to unmute and speak if that's okay? Great. So if we could have, if it's okay, I will go through the folks who are on, that kind of go in order on my screen and give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves as well. Let me just see. Okay, Paula, would you mind unmuting and introducing yourself if you would like?
I'm Paula, and I'm a beginner home gardener. You can't hear me?
No, we can, you're good.
Okay, I'm a beginning home gardener. I'm just here to learn what I can learn.
Thank you, Paula. Okay, Russell.
Hi, my name is Russell Zulo. I'm the coordinator at MDS that coordinates our garden beds here at Monadnock Developmental Services, and I'm also part of the CGC Advisory Committee.
So nice to have you here, Russell. And Libby is over in the corner.
Hi, Libby. Hi.
Yes, so the microphone listens to your voice and will kind of go towards you if you are speaking. So Russell couldn't see you, but I thought I'd call you, give you a shout out, Libby. Okay, Janet, you're up next if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Janet Doyg, and I'm a longtime gardener, but I've just retired this year, and I want to probably extend gardens and keep myself busy, so I'm just looking for new information.
Okay, great. Nice to have you here. Cindy, if you would like to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I live in Harrisville, and I heard about this through an email, I guess. I don't know how. And anyway, I'm a longtime gardener and just I'm always wanting to learn, and I'd like to learn more about planning and hear what you have to offer. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, Marcia.
Hi, I'm Larissa. I am a terrible gardener. I heard about you guys on Facebook and am really excited to hopefully not kill a bunch of plants.
Yes, isn't that always our goal? You know, we want the thriving bits, but sometimes the surviving bit is what we can get. That's also an admirable goal. Okay, Catherine, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, hi. I'm Catherine. I live in Leverett. I live in the woods, so I have challenges of pine trees. And then I also garden at a community garden, a Just Roots community garden. It's in full sun, which I love. And I have up in Leverett, I have challenges around. I'd like to know more about, certainly about rhubarb and certainly about design. I have raised beds because it's all monolithic rocks underneath the surface. And I like design also in relationship to, I suppose rotating crops or tips and ideas about that, about ready to put my snow peas in, that kind of thing. So longtime gardener, and I have things I haven't tried, like mycelium. I like wonder sometimes about like different things, additives into the soil, if that's useful. So things like that. Thank you.
And then there's somebody on here called iPhone. iPhone, would you like to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Beth from Wilton, New Hampshire. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm a new gardener, so I just wanted to learn incorporating vegetables and what to plant during this coming season and not to kill them, or trying to also learn how to make sure there's not a lot of grubs or stuff that's eating, especially like squash or broccoli or cruciferous that I planted last year. So I just want to learn something from you guys, which is I appreciate this time that you're putting in.
Well, we're so happy that you are here, and there's so much that we can learn from each other. So I really look forward to hearing what everybody has to say and share. So thanks so much for being here. Okay, Marcy, I see your hands up.
I'm Marcia Kaiser. I have grown flowers for a long time, and I'm trying to incorporate vegetables into my flower garden. I've got some strawberries and herbs, but I'd like to do some other things, and I may wind up just doing them in pots. But it's always fun to hear about new ways of doing things and how to amend the soil. And thank you for doing this.
Of course. Thank you so much, Marcia, for coming. And I'm so glad to hear that we have a diversity of experience in gardening, because we always have so much to learn from each other. So even though we'll have some resources available to you all and we'll have some time to really dive into those, I also want to honor that there's so much knowledge that we have just in the space right here, in our Zoom space, in our in-person space. So please always know that we would love and encourage you to share the knowledge that you have from gardening and from research that you all have done as well. So we are going to move into goal setting. Before we can really start planning, we got to figure out what we want to do in the first place. So I'm going to share a link in the Zoom. You can click on this link if you are in Zoom, and there's up at the top, garden goals checklist, and you can open that up, and I encourage you to write down your responses to this on a separate sheet of paper. It's the same thing that I'm handing out here, but I encourage you to respond to it in a way in a notebook that you have. Okay, so at the top we have the initial goal, the initial mission of the garden. And I will encourage you for a moment before we write anything to imagine. You can close your eyes if you would like, you don't have to, but try to imagine the space that you would like to have this year and that you will be gardening in, and what you would like to have there. Maybe you see flowers in a couple of pots. Maybe you see these beds that you have in your backyard. Maybe you see this space that is newly rototilled. And what do you imagine having there? Maybe not imagining the way that in the past those flowers didn't survive 2 weeks, or that pot that you forgot to use, because those are all things that we're gonna try to find different solutions to address. So what are some things that you're imagining? Okay, now take that part of your imagination, that hopeful piece, and start to try to write down the mission of your garden for this year. You have a space right at the top of that checklist if you're here in person. And if you are at home using Zoom, please use a notebook that you have to write out your mission for the garden. There are other spots, writing out specific goals and timelines, and we can use those spaces as we go through some of these other parts of planning and special topics. So you don't have to fill out the whole document right now, or if you're at home, you don't have to answer all of these questions right now, because hopefully as we go through some of these other topics, you might be able to clarify some of those specific goals and what success may look like and timing of things. So write out those initial goals, and we'll start talking about some methods of planning. Thanks so much for doing that imagining and some of that initial goal setting. And like I said, these sheets we'll continue to use as we go through this method of planning, the square foot gardening method of planning. And then when we go into special topics, so know that you can continue to use this sheet as a reference for how to make specific goals and how you hope to achieve those goals, maybe even going into that timeline. So maybe some of you know about square foot gardening. It's a method of gardening that really helps to use small spaces really efficiently and effectively in a way that might help you to imagine how this maybe small space could be used to grow many different things. So I will do a bit of let's see if the thing will move with me, a representation up here on this board first, and then I will offer up some additional resources to folks here in person and online about how you can use square foot gardening in your planning process. So let's use an example of a bed that you might have that is 3 feet by 6 feet. And maybe you know those specific dimensions of your garden, and maybe you don't, but you can use this as an example to start imagining. So in the square foot gardening method, you have that bed that is 3 feet by 6 feet, and you divide that bed by those dimensions, by each foot. My own dimensions will not be so perfect. But you can use things like string. If you have tacks that you would put into corkboard, you can put those on the edge of the bed at those dimensions of each foot, and then put string across those so that you can see each of those feet, those square feet in your garden bed. Even on a larger scale, if it's a larger bed, you can use this same method by putting stakes into the ground and putting, forgetting the word, like cord across. So you can use the same method at different scales. So let's see. That's 3. So again, not perfect by any means, but this might be what your bed looks like if you have a 3 foot by 6 foot bed. So now you have these squares that are in here, and those squares give you an idea of the amount of space that you have to plant different things. I'm now going to give a handout that gives some suggestions. Yes, I'm about to send it out to everybody online. that gives you some suggestions for each plant, what dimensions you can grow, how many of those plants you can grow in a square foot. So this gives you an idea of how many, and I'm about to send Zoom folks you a link for this document so you can see it as well. It's now linked in the chat if you would like to click on the link. And it gives you some suggestions for different plants and how many of those plants you might grow in a square foot. So does somebody want to either on Zoom unmute and give me a suggestion, or anybody here in person want to give me a suggestion of a plant and how many you might put in a square foot?
So basil,
Basil, and how many might you put in a square foot?
no idea.
Does it say on this sheet?
It says 1.
Oh, so it says 1. If it says 1, then that usually means the plant will get pretty big and can take up a good amount of space. Which, if you're thinking about the health of plants, you don't want to overcrowd them. It would make them more prone to disease and be less healthy. So then you might have problems later on in the year when you have, 4 basil plants really packed all together, and they might start to look sad and droopy because they don't have that space to have airflow and things like that. So this is a good recommendation about how much space they might need to really thrive. So let's say, for example, this is our square foot that we're going to put basil, and we're going to put 1. Does somebody else have a suggestion of something that they might want to grow and how many you can put in a square foot? Yeah.
Tomatoes.
Okay, tomatoes. How many of them do they recommend?
One.
What if they're grape tomatoes?
The small tomato varieties, even the small tomato varieties can get quite big. So those are another one that if they're really overcrowded, they can be pretty prone to certain types of funguses because the leaves can get on the ground and they don't have much airflow. Airflow is really helpful for having success with your plants and them to not get diseases. And healthy plants are so helpful when it comes to pests and diseases, because usually if you have a healthy plant, they'll be able to fight off on their own those pests and diseases a lot better. So I would say that cherry tomatoes and small tomatoes would be about the same. Okay. Did you have something to share about that?
I did.
Okay. So let's say, and they do recommend, they say that you can use this method to grow, for example, a whole bunch of basil. So you can use this method and say, I'm going to grow all of this in basil at this quantity of 1 per square foot, or you can use one of these beds and grow a lot of different things. So let's say, for example, we're going to put our tomato right next to the basil, which happens to be a great companion plant for tomatoes. So putting these right next to each other would be helpful on a variety of scales. So let's say here. Okay, anybody on Zoom have any thoughts about what plant you might want to grow and how many you could grow in a square foot? We also have a really great suggestion from Paula online that you can save all of these documents on that Google Drive that have been shared to your own computer at home so that you can have these as you're continuing to plan after this workshop. So that's a really great suggestion, Paula. Thanks for sharing. Any other thoughts on plants you might want to grow in spacing? Any that you can put closer together? Yeah, Libby.
How about carrots?
Carrots. Carrots, are they not on the sheet?
No, yeah, they are on the sheet.
Oh, how many can you grow?
They have it at 16.
16 in a square foot.
decided to give you a one with a lot of dots.
A lot of dots. So do they actually have all the little dots on
Yeah.
there? Oh, that's fun. Okay, so how do they have the dots oriented? 'Cause
4 rows of 4.
4 rows of 4. Okay, that's what I was thinking, because carrots, you usually grow in
Right.
like rows.
Exactly, so I haven't done it this way.
Yeah, so
I might try it.
maybe you might put your carrots over here and you put a row. Row. Which is pretty cool that you can put carrots. Usually you think of carrots, or I do anyway, of taking up a good amount of space, but this is giving you a suggestion of using a square foot to grow 16 carrots, which would be pretty awesome. You do want to be thoughtful about carrots in container gardens and raised bed gardens, because they do want a very loose soil. So if you're doing them in raised beds, and even in the ground, you really want to make sure that soil is worked so that there's not things like rocks and big clumps of dirt, because as soon as those roots hit something that's really hard, they're like, nah, not going to do that. And they start to put off all those funny little edges and sides
I
and stuff.
got to do that big last year.
Yeah, so
I didn't have good luck with it, so I'm gonna put it out to the universe that maybe, maybe this year.
I love carrots. I
I
know,
know,
grow,
right?
but
Favorite tea, night tea.
still
Worth the try. But,
I know I've had ones that have all kinds of like, they're like, I can't go down, so I'm gonna go
yeah.
every other way.
And they take a long time too, if I don't.
Yeah.
Right?
They do seem to take a long while. 70 days, I think, was what I read on one of the seed packets.
Could you talk about the squash and melon piece that's here in the plants?
Oh, so that one little piece down in the bottom corner is talking about things that grow out. So not stuff that grows up as much. And trellising is something that can be really helpful, especially on small scales. So that kind of goes into something called vertical gardening, because when you have a really small space, it's really helpful to grow up rather than out. So in vertical gardening, or in this case, how they talk about trellising, they're saying stuff that would usually grow out, like squashes, you can add trellises between, like for example, right here, you can add a big trellis, and then you can grow a squash plant there and a squash plant there. And then over time, you can start to really encourage it to go up the trellis versus what it wants to do, which is go like that.
And so the squash or the pumpkin wouldn't be too heavy?
It is a fine balance for squash, because you want, depending on the type of squash that you're growing, to put a trellis that is very sturdy. I have seen people grow pumpkins, like, you know, pretty decent sized pumpkins in a vertical style. What they used was like almost like timber framing level of work, not the like flimsy wire things, which would work fine for tomatoes, for example. But for things that are really, it would be much more beneficial in the long term to do something that's sturdy. Yeah, you can use wood. I could even imagine using like metal, I forget what those things are called. Things that you use for fencing, almost like big metal rods that you can put that are really strong and kind of like connect those together. But I bet if you look up different methods, I've also seen ones that are like timber framed like this. So they're pretty sturdy pieces of lumber, and they're connected like that. And because those pieces of wood are so sturdy and they're connected in a really stable way, those pumpkins just kind of like hang. And I have seen that the pumpkins do pretty fine. They don't seem to mind hanging. Sometimes people I have seen have like tried to hold them up if they start to look unhealthy, which is just a fun addition to your gardening experience. Yeah, Libby.
Although if you have a pretty big rototilled area, plant them directly,
Right.
but he planted the eggshells. I'm jealous of that, actually. Because I don't have great luck with my squashes. Because it's a raised bed, so that's neat. Think about that.
And I want to talk a little bit also about container gardening and how this could work in that kind of method as well. Because I know that not everybody does even have a huge on a small scale bed of like 3 by 6. You can use this same method in smaller spaces as well. You might have some funky dimensions to work with, but it gives you a general idea of, even if you're working with, like, you know, there's a lot of different types of pots that you might have, but even if you're thinking about like a kind of like 1-foot pot, that gives you an idea, like, oh, maybe I could put, what's something that you can put 4 of based on the sheet?
Green beans.
Green beans. So I would have thought maybe you could only fit 2 green beans in a foot, but using that method, you might even be encouraged to use a pot that's like a foot around to grow as many as 3 green beans. You just have to trellis them really well, which you would have to do in a bed like this as well. These are squash.
Oh, no, green beans says 9, I'm sorry, leaf lettuce.
Oh, lettuce, okay.
I'm sorry. That was-
Oh, no problem. No problem at all.
So lettuce, you would just plant like 4 seeds in there.
Yes, and there's some things,
Can you plant different kinds of lettuces, like green or red?
yeah, you
Should
definitely
they be
could.
in different buckets or the same?
So when you're planting the seeds, unless it's something, the only thing that I can think of that you wouldn't want to plant multiple varieties of is corn. If other people know other plants that you wouldn't want to plant together, I would love to hear. But corn is the only one where if you plant multiple varieties together, the pollen that they produce will kind of mix up the varieties before they even grow their pods. But most other things, I haven't heard of it super affecting what the other might taste like. I have heard, you know, the kind of gardener talk where some people are like, I'd never grow that lettuce next to that lettuce because I think it makes the butterhead taste funny. But most of the time, I would say that you can grow multiple different kinds of something close by and it shouldn't affect. Yeah, no problem. So I've been, yeah, please.
That 3 by 6 space, do you have a walkway in there or anything?
This is based kind of on a raised bed. So,
Oh, that's a raised bed.
yes, so this is kind of based on a raised bed. At least that's what I was imagining. If you have a space like you have said, it's kind of just like a rototilled area, you could, you know, easily, if you would like, put kind of a path cutting through. It depends a little bit on how you think that you're going to access certain things. So maybe if you have, you know, 6 feet on this side, 6 feet on this side, it would be pretty hard to get in there unless you're going to be stepping all in there. Yeah, which some people like to grow in a very foresty way. But in this kind of, if you're using this dynamic of growing, having a path or something or using raised beds can be really helpful so that you can easily access these different square feet that you're growing on. So this one does not, because it's using a raised bed idea, but if you, for example, this was just an open plot and you had more rows, you could use one of those feet to make a row, which in the long run might be pretty nice.
I'm so glad you said that because like Carolyn, I don't plan, I just put everything in and I had no idea last year my other space did really pretty well, but I had no path and I ended up walking and crushing the plants that I was working so hard to sustain.
Can't get to it from here. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, there, okay.
I wrote that down on my list. I have to remember to space like that.
That could
And I've used like cardboard on top to make the path that keeps the weeds down.
But then how do you keep the cardboard from blowing away? I tried that last year too.
Rocks or I've used camping stakes, you know, but better ideas.
No, I mean, over time, it starts to like almost become a part of the dirt. Putting like watering it almost, so it like starts to really adhere to the ground, can do that over time. But usually you want to put something that really holds it down in the meantime, so that it can really start to like stick to the ground almost. Cardboard is another great thing for helping with soil health. So keeping your garden covered all year long is really beneficial. And that can be done by growing things like greens under little covers. If you have, in Britain, I feel like they call them cloches, but I can't remember what they're called here, like where you have a rod that kind of goes over and you cover them, and you can grow greens, for example, throughout a lot of the winter until it gets like really, really cold. But you can also put cardboard on top of your raised bed. So for example, you might have some lettuce here, and then you might put some tomatoes here later on in the season in the summer. And then when you pull out those tomatoes at the end of the year, all of this you might pull out at the end of the year, and you can cover this whole bed area with cardboard and some other material. You don't want to use anything that might have seeds that you might not want to use stuff that you don't know if it has seeds, like leaves or things like that. But cardboard is a great thing to keep your garden bed covered. Soil, it loves to be, nestled and tucked in. So that's a really great way to go out into the later season. Is there anything that anybody online has been thinking about related to their own garden? Anything that you would want to plant, and what these resources say might be helpful in terms of dimensions to plant them in?
Russell, what's something you want to grow this year?
I think our main goal this year is to plant more foods that work well together and things people will actually eat, to kind of foster engagement with our community beds. So this square foot gardening really plays a big role in what we can grow and the things that will work together, maximizing our garden beds.
Thanks.
What are there in buckets? What are the best vegetables to grow in buckets? Because I have, MPS, they might not use the garden beds at the rec center. I was not really sure.
Oh.
I don't know if Christine is planning, but we might not use those ones at the rec center. And I heard her saying maybe some buckets.
Yeah, we
And
could
I
probably
just didn't
survive
know.
those.
And plus, our garden is like in a parking lot and like outside, like so she does put them in buckets. With last year, we had like tomatoes that grew really good, and a lot of things like cabbage and broccoli we had in these buckets or whatever they were, and it didn't really. I know lettuce, tomatoes, obviously, maybe green peas, like beans and peas.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm wondering why the brassicas didn't do super well in the buckets. Something to consider when you're growing in containers, especially, is like the soil, what kind of soil you're putting in there, because it can get depleted pretty easily, and certain plants might need more of something than others.
What kind of soil to
containers, that might be something that we can look up in the resources that we have. I'm not super sure what kind of combination of soil would be best, but even looking up online specifics for each plant might be really helpful. Just because
I'm on it with an organization, so I don't exactly know. I will be helping the organization. I will not be doing it myself. I'm just gathering information to bring back, and that might be helpful and that they might want to use.
Yeah, well, we can, especially because we work with you all as CGC. I would, you know,
I don't know this year, that's the thing.
Oh,
I
okay.
know I'm working with MFS, and I don't know if they're connected to MFS, when I'm not in the services.
MFS has been connected historically with us. This
Yeah.
is with Community Garden Connections. And I'm even thinking, like, maybe we could do a joint workshop about specific to container gardens
Yeah,
that could help both sites, so to speak.
yeah, I don't know exactly what Christine is planning, but I know I asked her about the beds at the rec center, and she said that she really wasn't, because we don't have a lot of people interested
Yeah.
in working with 5.5 beds. I think it would be extremely difficult to have get people to do that, so.
Yeah.
I think she's talking about containers, if we do that.
Yeah. And
But
we
there
could-
is no, anything about it yet. She just talked about, doing it there.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
contain-
definitely an option, like, and individual people could have the individual beds too.
Yeah, I know I'm helping with, behind the wine, so.
But that's a good thing for us. We should stay in communication so that we don't need supplies or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna tell her we could use the supplies and you might as well.
Yeah.
If we
yeah.
can,
That's
keep in
great.
touch, yeah, I would let them know that I went to the workshop.
Yeah.
What I brought out of it.
Love that.
And I'll give them the sheet and, what works best, what looks like it's gonna work.
Yeah, that'd be
And
great.
then, yeah.
We can definitely support those efforts.
Question.
Yes.
What I'm being stupid.
No.
Here is plant one, is that one row or is that one plant?
One plant per square foot.
One plant per square. Okay.
Yes, so all of those, when it shows a little square and like 4 dots in the square, or it says 4, that means within a square foot of your garden, you can plant 4 plants. Like that. So when it says you can plant 1, then you would only plant that 1 in the square foot.
Okay, I got you.
It's just giving you a recommendation based on, kind of dividing your garden like this. How many can I put in that 1 square? So if you imagine that all of these kind of lines going through the whole thing are like string that you lined up at, a foot at this, in this way. So that's a string. And these are strings that within that square that you've created of the string, you can plant 1 basil.
A large basil.
Yeah,
What's that one?
The blue one or purple one, isn't there?
there's sweet basil gets pretty big.
Yeah.
But other basils, and I can pull up, I don't know if it was on this one, I don't think so. But there's a square foot gardening where it gives you recommendations based on the back of a seed packet.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, on the back of the seed packet, it'll give you recommendations for spacing. So if it says, for example, the spacing should be like 12 inches between each plant, then that means you would put it in 1, because that's like giving it 12 inches, a foot of space around it. So if it says like plant spacing 12 inches, then that gives you a pretty good idea that it wants to be in 1 of those square feet. If it says 6 inches, then you might be able to fit in, 2 of those plants, and so on and so forth. I can pull up those recommendations.
I think it's on the backs of the seed package.
Yes, that is, there's one in the square foot gardening specifically that gives you like that breakdown, but you can also kind of put it together based on those recommendations on the back of the seed packet. Yeah, Catherine, go ahead if you were raising your hand first, and then Cindy, I'll get to your question in just a second.
It was a little bit about, I don't know if you can hear me if I've got my mute off.
Can hear
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was looking at calendula. You were talking about ideas earlier, and one of the things I do is calendula because I really like them in salads. And I also use bee balm. I use the petals of different flowers that come up, but I was wondering what might be the best space for calendula. I'm thinking that, I don't know, it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 per square, but it's not on the list.
Yes, I'm just looking it up online. It might, again, kind of a general recommendation I can make is on the back of the seed packets. And this isn't always super helpful if you're getting like seeds from friends and packets that have just handwritten names on them, which is a beautiful thing, but doesn't have that information on the back. I can look that up online as well. And I would imagine they get pretty big if you let them get big. I would say just based on like thinking of a calendula plant, I wouldn't want to put more than like 2 in one space. Maybe even 1 if you know, usually if you give a plant space, especially a big flower like that, they can, yeah. So this one says, sow seeds between 6 and 18 inches. So that's almost like, you know, either 2 per square foot or 1 per square foot. So that's kind of what I would imagine.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And I love also growing flowers. I love calendula for putting in salves because it's really good for your skin if you get cuts. And it's kind of like Neosporin, but made from flowers, which I love. So you put the
Right.
You can put, yes. So, Catherine, how do you put calendula in salads? Do you
In
use
salads?
Yeah.
I just use the leaves. I just use the leaves in salads.
Oh, okay. So you don't use the petals, the flower petals.
I'm sorry. I use the petals only. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, the petals are also beautiful. Borage is also another one you can put the flowers
Oh yeah, I
in.
like borage.
I like borage too, and the bees love borage. That's another thing that could be really cool to add to a goal. When you're thinking, when we get into the smaller groups, another great goal is planting some things for pollinators or for beneficial insects. There's a lot of insects that are actually are predators for the insects that we don't want in our gardens. So if you plant certain flowers that, you know, through some research say these are really good for beneficial insects, that can be another goal to set so that you're helping your other plants, your vegetables and things ahead of time. So I want to give everybody some time specifically for kind of sketching out your own garden space. So you can, on the back of the goals sheet, if you're here in person, it's a blank sheet of paper. And there's, as you're starting to look at the back of the sheet, go ahead. I just am remembering that Cindy had a question. So as everybody's starting to sketch out their own garden space on the back, I just wanted to touch in with, oh, did you? Okay. You want to drop by the line? Yeah, okay, so you said yes, right? Yeah, there are so many resources here. Some of the handouts I shared at the very beginning were about the tool lending library. Bye, we look forward to seeing you very soon. I know, I'll see you soon. And the grow a row, which is another great goal. If you feel like you have enough space to grow some food for the community kitchen. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to have those.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. No problem. And all of these handouts are available over in the atrium at the Seed Lending Library. So both, if you're here in person, both the maker space and the seed library, where you can check out, you can take seeds, you are going to be open right after this. So you can check out what tools they have available to rent. And you can also look at what seeds are available. And if you're zooming in from online, it's whenever the library is open, you can go look at the seeds because that's in the atrium all the time. And then I'm not sure the makerspace hours but you can always rent out the things from the makerspace, right?
I just want to check out the seat, please.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Afterwards, it'll be, yeah, I can show you after the workshop. You, can you point the,
Well, yeah, I'll just say really quickly since it was brought up. On our website, we do have a link to the seed and tool lending library. You can submit an online form if there's certain seeds that you do want to pick up, and we will pull them for you based on availability. All the tools in the collection are on the website. You can see an example here on the screen. And you can reserve those just like any book. You can place a hold. We will pull it from the makerspace and put that on hold for you and let you know when you can pick up. Yep, we have seeds out in the atrium, but if you are home and you're thinking, I need carrot seeds for this weekend, you can submit a form, and of course, if you know, it's depending on availability, we can pull those for you. But we do have an online form under that borrow seed lending. And that's all on the website for resources, makerspace, and then it has its own link.
great, thank you, Jay. Okay, so on the back of that sheet, if you have an idea of your space, which I imagine you all do, maybe not the specific dimensions that you have, but if you have that idea in your head, you can start to sketch out what your dimensions look like. So if you have, 3 raised beds, you can start to put together what that square foot garden method might help to kind of separate that out. And if you're at home, please use a separate sheet of paper to do this. So if you have like an 8 foot by 4 foot bed, feel free to start kind of sketching that out on the back of your sheet. If that's hard to imagine or anything, maybe use this time to start writing out the vegetables that you wanted to grow and imagining, you could even note down based on that sheet that you have for the square foot gardening, how much space, how many you could put in 1 square foot of space. So just giving yourself an idea of the vegetables that you're starting to want to grow, or the flowers that you want to grow, the herbs that you want to grow, and how much space those might start taking up. You can either do that by sketching out your plot like this, like I did, or if you don't have a great idea of the dimensions, you can just write out the vegetables and what they recommend on the spacing in the square foot method. So if you want to take a few minutes to do that, if you're online, if you go back to that link, I can share it again in the agenda. There is the link that I just shared again. And you can go to, it's under garden planning, and it's square foot gardening online planner. And if you click on that, it'll take you to this website where you can do a square foot gardening plan online. And what you'll want to click is start planning your garden. Have any questions, please let me know. I'm clicking on these links as well to make sure everything's opening up. And it gives you some recommendations on spacing. So for example, this is giving you a 3 by 6 bed. But if you want, you can expand that as well by adding in different squares. If you click on a square, it'll open up different options that you can add for plants. So I can add in basil, and it'll say how many basils I should put in 1 square. and it says 1 basil. I can click on another square and put tomato, and it gives me 1 tomato as the option. Is anybody having any troubles finding this? Or would it be more helpful if I shared my screen and then you all could see what I was doing? Okay, I see a head shape. So I'm going to go back to the home screen. Links I have. So here is what I am seeing. So this is the SFG planner, so square foot gardening planner. And this is giving me a 3 by 6 space. And it's breaking up those 3 feet by 6 feet space into those 1 foot squares. So if I click on that 1 foot, it gives me options of a bunch of different vegetables that I can decide to plant. And let's say I want to plant some kale. And then if you look right there in that square, it'll say for kale. So I could, plant in a square, like a square of kale, 1 in each corner. And it also gives you a recommendation for how long it would take for that to grow. And when is a good idea to, it says if you planted it on April 20th, you might expect to start to get some on July. So this is a great planner in an online format, and just it gives you a good idea of how the methods of this might work. I really encourage you to do it in a way that makes sense for your style of learning and visualizing. If you love online formats for things, this is a great design tool. If you are more of a wanting to write it out type of visualizer and planner, please use a sheet of paper to start to imagine the different vegetables that you would like to grow and how the square foot gardening might help. Something I just wanted to mention to everybody, if you're online or in person, is that you might make a plan for your 3 by 6 bed for what you want to plant right now in spring. So maybe you have a lot of lettuces, you have a lot of carrots and beets and things that kale, you said? Kale for spring, right? So all of these vegetables that are really, they like a little bit of cold. They don't like the sun to be too hot. But those are going to come out at some point, and you're going to want to be thinking about, so this square foot, right now, this one has carrots in it. But then, maybe after those carrots come out, you might be thinking about, okay, so what might I put after carrots? And what might I want to put in the soil after carrots? So it's really for soil health, pretty good to not put the same things in the soil over and over and over again in the same spot. So I wouldn't want to keep putting carrots there. Maybe if I want to grow later season carrots, I can put them up in the top corner over here where I haven't grown carrots for a few years. But what I might put here, maybe I'll put a pepper. And I can look up how many peppers I might want to put. I imagine probably 1. So then you can start to think about how each square might be something different throughout the season, which can help you have a plan over the season. So you might have a spring square foot gardening plan, and then a summer square foot gardening plan as these things start to rotate out. So that's also something good to keep in mind.
you know what kind of vegetables like could be put in now?
Yeah, so spring vegetables. And please don't let me be the only person to share if you have any ideas. Yeah, Libby.
Lettuces and spinach, like cold.
Mm-hmm. Peas. Peas really love cold. Carrots they need a little bit warmer soil than peas. Peas are like, if the ground's thawed, I'll do my thing. But carrots take a little bit more warmth on the soil, but they do prefer it to be a little bit cooler, or they can at least stand a little bit cooler. Does anybody online have any thoughts about spring vegetables, different things that are good to grow in the spring?
Start our seeds outside, or I guess we can start them inside now, right? Put them outside every day.
It depends on what you're growing. If you're growing these early season vegetables that don't mind the cold, you can direct sow a lot of those.
Put those out now.
Yeah, from maybe now a little bit later. Some things might want it a little bit warmer. But yeah, I would say now to early May, you could start direct seeding some early vegetables, like peas. Peas would definitely do okay. Now you can direct seed a lot of like lettuces and carrots and things. You could wait a little bit longer into May, just if you wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to do a lot of hard freezes. Yeah. So, but it's kind of like finding that middle ground of not wanting to wait too long, but they're only just starting to get to the point of harvest when it's starting to get really hot and they don't like it. Like peas, once it gets really hot, they just can't, certain varieties especially, just cannot do that. So you're trying to find that sweet spot of things that like it cold. For plants that are summer plants, so again, if you're thinking about like, okay, what do I have in my spring bed? Maybe I direct sow my spring bed. So I direct sow my peas and my lettuces and my kales. And I don't think that, I don't necessarily need to transplant anything for that. For your summer vegetables, peppers, corn, if you want to have tomatoes, yeah, anything like that, even basils. Yeah, you wanna start those inside if you want to start things inside around now. Yeah. That's if you want to get them out at the very earliest that you can. You can also start them a little bit later, and that just means you get them out a little bit later and have a less time of harvest. But it all depends on what you want your kind of schedule to start looking like. Yeah, so it's really great to be thinking about how you want to do crop rotation throughout that too. And it's a really good idea to think about seed starting now, so you can kind of plan for what do I want to grow now in the spring, what do I want to grow in the summer, and then what might I grow in the fall.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
But I have to ask you, there's some rumor out there about jumping worms. Have you heard about these?
Jumping worms. I did my research before coming here, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like there's a whole ton of options about specifically jumping worms. I have heard also we don't want to hate all earthworms. So I think everybody's like scared that jumping worms, because they look so much like a lot of other earthworms, is we're gonna like start to just like massacre all of the worms. They do have a very specific habit of, if you touch them, they like wriggle and like kind of like squirm and jump like crazy. So those, you can tell those are jumping worms. The thing that I have seen that has been more successful in different tests, I think that in Wisconsin they're trying to do at the extension in Wisconsin, they're trying to do some tests on jumping worms because they have them as well, is that diatomaceous earth, which is used in a lot of organic pest management practices. and natural pest management practices is pretty good at killing the adults. If you're trying to kill the infant stage or I guess the larva of it, I have seen that there has been some success in covering your garden bed for 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks with like clear plastic to basically like hyper heat up the earth. And that can be, some of this research is in pretty early stages. But I have seen some success. People say they've had some success with really heating up the ground in that way with plastic that heats the space. But diatomaceous earth is kind of like the gardener's best friend in terms of negative pest problems or pest management problems. It works with worms. It works with a lot of different problems. So that would be my recommendation is diatomaceous earth, which is it's a type of stone that's really finely ground up, and the particles are really sharp. So for a small insect, it basically kind of like cuts them all up. It's pretty gruesome, but I mean, at a certain part of the gardening season, you feel pretty like ready to just
to do it.
To take them out in any way necessary. So diatomaceous earth is what I've heard a lot of success in a lot of things.
Where do you get it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Because I'm used to chickens.
Yeah, mites are another thing that diatomaceous earth can help with.
Ironically, wear a mask.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it gets.
Into your lungs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly expensive.
Oh, no, it's not bad.
Yeah, it does do the trick.
And it's just like a rock, basically, a ground up rock.
You could, yeah.
Okay.
It also kills the good things. So
it's hard. You want to really.
You want to be targeted a little bit more than the question is all over the.
Oh, I see.
At first I was like, oh yeah, you could, but then you get the good and the bad. So. I think I have. There's a question of have we seen jumping worms? There's another.
I haven't, but I haven't been gardening in this area for super long, so.
There's another invasive that I can't remember the name of it. It's a really long, not a jumping worm.
Is it a green?
Looks like a worm, but it's much longer than your typical.
Huh. Interesting. Well, this is a good place to start moving into some of our special topics. And since we have a smaller group here in person, I'll give you all the resources and the questions so that you all can look through some of these resources, maybe use some of those questions that you all have to dive into specific parts of these questions about soil and maybe pests and diseases and things like that. And online, I'm going to share with you some resources that you can start to look through right now and think about those questions that you might have about either problems that you imagine arising or things that you want to add to your goals based on perusing through some of these resources. So they are also in that document that I shared, the virtual agenda. So you can see that there's under the special topics, insects and plant health, soil, and seeds. So if you want to start perusing those, please look at things that feel like they would be beneficial to you. And we will actually mute the chatting from the, actually we're a small enough group, but yeah, let's keep it all together. Let's be in this together. So if you all want to be perusing those resources, please, unmute and share important things that you feel like would be really helpful for your gardening practice. And I can start to document those things that you feel like would be very helpful. I'm going to share that document again. And after I hand out some of the resources here in person and you get a chance to peruse some of those online, I'll put in the questions that we're thinking about. So I will be right back to put those questions in. So we're talking about a seed starting document that you can get at the library that just talks about how you might start some of your seeds. Is there anything on there that you notice that seems important? Light. Yes, yes. And we actually here at the library have some heat mats. Are there any available still to rent out?
Oh, I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
There are some seed growing kits that will be available in the makerspace in a minute.
Yeah, great.
But what was it?
Oh, so they were asking about, or they were mentioning that you need heat for some. So I was gonna mention that there are heat mats available when you rent out a kit.
Okay, so it might be, yeah, I'll have to just check.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
I wish I remembered that this year.
Yeah, right.
This year. To do your seed starting inside and like I haven't had any luck. But you've had better luck.
I have, but my things like peppers and tomatoes, I didn't have any luck until I actually rented out one of the seed starting kits here at the library that was really, it helped a lot of those things that need warmth to start germination, which is like peppers. They can't handle cold to germinate. So you put it under like your seed starting tray and it warms up the soil and the peppers can start to grow. And they have some of those kits here, which is really amazing, that have lights and they have that heat mat as well as little pots. So, you know, folks online and folks here, you can rent out one of those kits as well as all those tools to help start your seeds. So it can be, they have a lot of really helpful stuff here. And I see Russell made a comment. Yeah, that's true. So Russell is saying, I shared something online that we didn't look too much about here in person. So I can share it on the screen again. And what Russell was mentioning is that on this site, you can see how long it takes for each of the plants to grow, which might help with that rotational gardening method. Was there something that you thought that might be really helpful for Russell?
Yeah, one of the issues in engagement we've been struggling with as far as our beds go are plants not ripening or maturing at the same rate. So we would have to harvest on multiple times throughout the year. So one of the things we want to focus on is when we pick plants is to pick plants that mature around the same time. So then we can harvest a bed by bed throughout the year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that they all kind of go together. And if I'm remembering correctly, that was something, it's almost like you're using the feedback from each year to try to pick the practices so that you're growing things that go together and also that kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that kind of noticing of how one season goes and applying that knowledge to the next season is so valuable. Because each time you garden, you learn so much about what you know and what you don't and what you want to try to do better at. Yeah.
Have a great day.
Oh,
I'll check out the seed library really quickly before I go. So, thanks.
Put it out.
Oh, there.
I perfectly might want some soil in there.
I have to use the smallest. I have to go buy some stuff.
Yes,
Yeah, that would be great.
So.
It's at the,
These are the.
you can just take it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I'll do it.
Is that?
Yeah, and so there's parts of it that need to be, most of it needs to be returned down the seed tray.
Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Oh, and it has a cover. Yeah, I was gonna say, that's it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And, we were just, some people here, have been talking about soil.
Yes.
And I wanted to, highlight one of the resources that was on that document, which is the UNH extension. They have soil testing services, that you can go to different spots throughout your garden, whether it's a raised bed, or a larger garden space. You can send them different, soil samples that they will analyze and tell you what is in your soil, how much organic matter there might be, how much, of different things might you add to help plants grow within your soil. I think it's $20 for a home test.
There must be a.
Or a small scale
Yeah, because I don't want to just
operation.
planting stuff every year. With my third
It
year.
says
I
it
don't want to waste
includes
my
all of these things, which are so helpful when figuring out what might be happening with certain plants if they're not
It is.
super successful one year. It might be that the soil is
Yeah.
missing a certain element that might really help. For example, maybe your soil has pretty low organic matter, and that could be really difficult for your plants to be able to grow in that. So Libby, you were just talking about the soil test. So I pulled up the UNH extension soil testing site. So for home gardens, it's $20 to test for a huge variety of things that is really helpful for knowing about in your garden. And I didn't catch their name. Do you know who brought this?
Oh, that's Amy, yeah.
Amy. So Amy from the library brought us an example of one of the seed starting kits. So I'm trying to think about where I can do this stuff online, folks. Oh yeah, for the seed starting kit, you just rent it out. So I can keep it for like. Okay, great. They can see. Okay, so when you come to the library, there's this form that you have to, there's like the procedures that you have, and then there's also a form that is like a rental agreement form. So you just go to the circulation desk, you fill out a rental agreement form, and then they'll give you this box.
Wow.
And in the box, you have a tray, and everything has to be returned except for this tray.
Okay.
This you can keep, and you can reuse these for a couple of years. They are pretty sturdy. And it comes with a little tray and a lid. The humidity is really helpful for seed starting. So you get the tray and the lid. And then you also get a heat mat that you can plug in. And this will heat from the bottom of your seeds. So you can put it right under your seed tray. So you have your seed tray and you put it on top of the heat mat as it's plugged in. And this is so helpful for plants that really need warm soil to grow, like peppers. And tomatoes can really kind of get them going too. It honestly helps most plants because once the soil is warmer, they're like, okay, it's time.
I'll grow now.
Yeah. It also comes with a seed starting information packet and a seed starting book. as well as a light that you also plug in. And it looks like it just needs a plug-in adapter. And you can just kind of like spread these out. And you can clip this to like a table, for instance, like, ooh, not sure if I got the hamstring. Like to a table like this, but it also has something that you can clip it onto so that you can kind of put it on a table. Like that. So you can rent these out and you have a whole little seed starting kit for quite a few plants. For example, I used one to get a lot of my summer vegetables started. But now is a good time to start a lot of summer things. So I definitely recommend coming to the library and renting one out if you're thinking about seed starting right now. It's super helpful. Yeah, so they have so many things that if you're thinking about starting seeds, they have seeds and a seed starting kit. If you need something to get your garden bed prepared, they have all of the tools in the makerspace. There are so many resources here at the library that can help you get your garden space going for the season.
We love the library. It's awesome. That'll be my big hurrah, because I have to check that out.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Any other questions about getting your gardens going, about soil, or any things that you've learned in the past about how to handle certain pests or bring in insects? Oh, so Russell, there's a question about MDS and what you all do.
So MDS stands for Monadnock Developmental Services, and we're what's called an area agency that works with different vendors to provide home health care and community-based supports for individuals with disabilities.
Awesome, thank you so much for sharing. And Catherine, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question about the use of eggshells in the garden. When you've had them from home, you maybe grind them up, break them down. I know they're good in compost, but are they good directly on any particular plants? Do you recommend any of that?
So if you look back or think about that soil test, one of the things that they test for is calcium. And certain plants really need a lot of calcium because they use that in their vegetable development. So for example, tomatoes need a lot of calcium. So if your soil is lacking calcium, then they might have a harder time to develop their fruit. And it could be one of the reasons when you have a tomato plant that isn't producing fruit very well. So I can't say for sure all of the vegetables that might need calcium, but that's the reason why I've heard that people use eggshells. So for example, I know people when they're planting a tomato plant, they'll put a ton of eggshells in the hole where they put the tomato plant, or they kind of mulch the bottom of the tomato plant with eggshells so that calcium is seeping into the soil. This can be something that you do with other natural soil amendments as well, whether you're working in some compost or you're adding some other amendments. It's really helpful to be thinking about what the plants might need as you are planting. Are you about to head out?
Yes.
Okay, would you mind filling out a feedback form real quick?
Not at all.
So that is what I have heard calcium or eggshells are used for, is adding calcium into the soil.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And also as a pest management, but I haven't heard as much, a certainty about the success in that. because sometimes people will put eggshells around the base of their plant to keep certain pests from climbing up. But DT or DE, Diatomaceous Earth, I've heard more success in putting that at some of the base of the plants. But as we were saying, Diatomaceous Earth can have negative impacts on positive insects as well. So it's kind of
slugs.
balancing.
I think people
Yeah.
use eggshells for slugs.
Yeah, so they can be used for a soil amendment, and also some people use them as a pest deterrent as well. Any other final thoughts about those things before we move into our closing? Okay, great. And I will be sending out these resources that I've shared here, as well as the Community Garden Connections website, where you can find a lot of different resources about the things that we've talked a little bit about here today, as well as some additional considerations for gardening. And I'm about to put into the chat the Community Garden Connections email. So if anybody here has any questions, you can send them to us. And you can find all the resources about the library on the library's website for gardening. We will also, in May, start to have volunteer work parties at the Westmoreland Garden Project donation garden, where we donate the produce to the community kitchen. So I really recommend, if you're interested in community gardening, reaching out to us so that we can connect you with those volunteer opportunities. Okay. So much. And before I send out the feedback form, I would love if anybody wanted to share some way that they will put hope into action during their gardening season this year, either based on things that you brought into this gardening workshop or things that you're taking away. So does anybody want to share something that they feel like they can do to put that gardening hope into action? Yeah, Russell.
I was really interested in the use of trellises in between climbing plants, because I'd never thought of that. One of the things that people have suggested we grow are things like squash and things like that. But we were kind of deterred from it because of the ground space needed. So that's interesting that I might try this year.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I know in small spaces. Please contact us. Our card is out on that table if you want to get our email. Thank you. Yeah, there are so many different methods too. The fun thing about gardening is, you know, people are always coming up with these really fun and kind of, you wouldn't have thought about it, ways to make things work. And I bet there are a lot of really interesting vertical gardening resources here at the library and online that can help with things like that too, to learn a little bit about what other folks have done for squashes. So I hope squashes become a possibility for you all, Russell. Anybody else have any thoughts about how they are going to move forward in the gardening season with some of these ideas?
But just in general for me, Catherine here, I'm really liking using the method so I can really look closer at the space needed, and just, I try to fit too much in my garden. So I think it's giving me a clearer, process and better planning. So I'm looking forward to using this and sharing it with some other gardeners. So thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. And I am totally on the same page about wanting to fit so many things into the garden. And what I have found about that is it usually is to my own demise or detriment, because the plants are usually happier if you give them some space. So this method has definitely helped me do that as well. And I'm so happy to hear that you want to pass some of this information on. I hope that it is the start to a great gardening season for you and who you share it with. Would anybody else like to share before I send out a feedback form that would be super helpful for us? Great, I'm gonna find more. Give you a little bit of time. So as we're opening this up, I want to again say that I'm so grateful for you all being here, and I hope that this is really the start of a beautiful gardening season for you all. Again, I'm here with Community Garden Connections, and our goal is to increase food access and security, and we love partnering with the King Public Library because they have all of these resources that are making that a possibility for so many people. So if you have any other thoughts or questions, please reach out to us at communitygardens@antioch.edu and fill out this feedback form if you have a moment to do so. And I will be here for this last 10 minutes to answer any additional questions, or if you have any thoughts about the resources at the library, I would love to stick around and help out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
sure.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.